Welcome to History Date Night, a World War II podcast covering the Second World War in chronological order, from the opening shots to final victory. I'm Justin, and joining me is my wife and co-host, Jenny. Together we explore the people, battles, and turning points that shape the deadliest conflict in human history, one date at a time. On this episode, 5-6 waves a day.
Most of his audience would find alarming.
But his army's condition is the problem.
Welcome back to History Date Night. I'm Jenny. Last episode, we covered the Auschwitz site being selected, Heydrich being formally appointed to plan the final solution, and Churchill's warning that there is not a week, nor a day, nor an hour to be lost. This episode, January 28th through February 4th, is the week the Winter War stops being a Finnish miracle and starts being a war of attrition Finland may not be able to win. Timoshenko's rebuilt Red Army falls on the Mannerheim Line with a weight of metal that the Finns have no answer to. We'll cover that in detail, but first, 3 speeches that together capture the strange, suspended state of the wider war.
I'm Justin. This week has a teenage Norwegian sailor celebrating his 17th birthday on a German submarine after watching his brother drown. The first German plane to crash on English soil, Frank Sinatra recording his first songs with Tommy Dorsey, and the Nazis renaming Prague's railway stations to erase the men who built Czech democracy. The war is everywhere, so let's get into it. On January 29th in Paris, French Prime Minister Edouard Daladier delivers a national radio address. The title alone is a statement of intent. The Nazis' aim is slavery, he says. For us, there is more to do than merely win the war. We shall win it, but we must also win a victory far greater than that of arms. In this world of masters and slaves which those madmen who rule at Berlin are seeking to forge, we must also save liberty and human dignity. It is a genuinely stirring piece of oratory.
And on the same day, through diplomatic channels in Stockholm, the Soviet Union sends a quiet signal that changes the entire character of the Winter War. A Soviet note reaches Sweden indicating that the USSR has no objection in principle to a possible peace agreement with the legitimate Finnish government of Prime Minister Ruti, the actual elected government, not the Kuusinen puppet. The character of the war appears to be shifting. The Soviets are no longer insisting publicly on the Kuusinen government, and the conflict increasingly looks like a struggle over territory and security rather than a revolutionary war. Finland has a war that it might survive if it can hold on long enough to negotiate.
On January 30th in Berlin, in the Sportpalast, a vast indoor arena in western Berlin, one of the largest entertainment venues in Germany that has hosted everything from boxing matches to cycling races, but is now being used primarily for Nazi party rallies. The location of tonight's event is kept secret until a few hours before it begins. Ever since George Elser's bomb killed 8 people at the Burgerbräu in November, Hitler's movements are guarded more carefully. Tonight is the 7th anniversary of the Nazis taking power, on January 30th, 1933. Hitler takes the podium.
His first major anniversary address since surviving the assassination attempt is defiant. He demands Lebensraum, leaving space for Germans. He ridicules Chamberlain, Churchill, and Daladier by name, and declares that since they wanted war and started the war, they will get all the war they want. He promises German victory. The hall is full. The crowd responds as it always responds. What Hitler doesn't say, because he can't, because the domestic economic reality is classified, is that Germany went to war in a condition most of his audience would find alarming.
Germany's economic situation in early 1940 is considerably more fragile than its military posture suggests. Average GDP growth in the 1930s under the Nazis was actually below the rest of the Western world. Military spending throughout the decade had built up a serious budget deficit. The only sustainable response to that deficit, the one who built the entire Nazi political economy, is expansion by conquest. Lebensraum isn't just ideology, it's also a financial necessity. Germany entered 1940 with serious economic weaknesses.
And the cracks are showing in practical ways. The German rail system is in a precarious state. Passenger services and coal deliveries have significant problems because rolling stock is being prioritized for military use. The army is short of vehicles. Germany's top admiral, looking at the surface fleet, reportedly concludes privately that the Navy only knows how to go down with dignity. Germany has the most formidable army in Europe and the most operationally effective air force. Behind that impressive facade, the infrastructure is strained, the treasury is stretched, and the clock is running. Hitler cannot afford a long war. This makes the phony war more dangerous for Germany than it appears.
Now set that against Daladier's speech. He is the leader of a nation whose soldiers, we noted last episode, have stopped shaving and can't raise the effort to clear the table after eating. His rhetoric, "We must save liberty and human dignity," is genuine and historically important. But his army's condition is the problem. Max Hastings, the British historian, put it this way: Germany's great advantage in this war was not military superiority. It was that the Allies had made a principled commitment to confront and defeat Nazism, while lacking any real appetite for the bloody initiatives and human sacrifice required to achieve it. That gap between the commitment and the willingness to pay the cost is what the phony war is made of.
January 29th, the Atlantic. The Norwegian cargo ship Eika is sailing with salt from Spain when she is spotted by U-51 and torpedoed at 3:30 in the afternoon. 14 men are killed. 2 survive: a stoker named Alfred Johansen and a 16-year-old deck boy named Harald Stula. Harald and his brother Arn have both been aboard the Eika. Arn does not survive. Harald and Alfred are pulled from the water by U-51.
The U-boat U-51 has to abort its patrol due to technical difficulties and returns to Wilhelmshaven on February 8th. Harald and Alfred are aboard for the entire transit, prisoners on a German submarine for over a week. On February 4th, Harald Stuhl turns 17 years old. The submarine's captain, Korvettenkaptein Nor, gives the boy a drink of schnapps and some chocolate for his birthday. A week after arriving in Germany, both men are released and sent home to Norway. Harald Stuhl is a minor among the names of the dead and rescued, a number in an Admiralty report. But he is also a 17-year-old boy who watched his brother die and then spent a week on the vessel that killed him, eating birthday chocolate gifted by the captain.
On January 30th, U-55, another German U-boat, meets its end. U-55 had just sunk 2 Allied ships when it is located by a combined British and French force, 2 British destroyers, 2 French destroyers, and a short Sunderland flying boat from number 228 Squadron RAF. The Sunderland attacks first with depth charges, then the destroyers close in. U-55 is sunk. 41 of the crew surrender. Kapitänleutnant Vernal Heidel, the U-55's commander, chooses not to come up. He goes down with his ship. This is one of the first successful examples of the aircraft-destroyer cooperation that would eventually turn the tide in the Atlantic.
On February 1st in the Karelian Isthmus, Finnish reconnaissance aircraft fly over Soviet positions opposite the Suma sector of the Mannerheim Line on the morning of February 1st and photograph what they find. When the photos are developed and examined, the Finnish commanders are shocked. Overnight, and I mean literally overnight, Soviet artillery in that sector has nearly doubled. 200 heavy guns now face the Suma position, and those are only the uncamouflaged guns that they can see in the photographs.
Then the bombardment begins. An estimated 300,000 shells fall in the Viipuri Gateway sector in the first 24 hours. That's a 10-mile stretch of comparatively open ground between the Salmijoki River and Lake Muolanjärvi, identified as the best approach corridor for tanks. At specific Finnish bunkers, the Soviets have moved individual cannon to point-blank range. The Papies bunker, a heavy Finnish concrete fortification that had changed hands several times in December and been pounded again and again without falling, now has a Soviet 6-inch cannon positioned just 500 meters away, fully camouflaged. The same preparation has been repeated near every major Finnish strongpoint.
And then the infantry comes. Wave after wave of Soviet troops, 5, 6 waves a day, advancing across open ground into Finnish positions. Finnish machine guns cut them down, and it does not stop. The difference between December and February is this. In December, when the Soviet infantry took catastrophic casualties, commanders reported it and the attack stalled. In February, Timoshenko has factored the casualties into the equation. Fresh units rotate in. The attackers are replaced by more attackers. The Finns cannot replace anyone. Their artillery is so low on shells that batteries have orders to fire only when under direct ground assault. Any fire or warmth for cooking draws an immediate Soviet barrage. Phone cables are destroyed as fast as they can be repaired. Men are buried alive in collapsed dugouts.
Timoshenko has a brutal strategy. Russian units can be rotated. Finnish units cannot. The Soviets have a huge numbers advantage and can absorb significant human losses to accomplish its goals. The cumulative physical and psychological strain, the deprivation of sleep, warmth, food, hope itself, is designed to grind the defenders down until even Finns reach their breaking point. The Finns know exactly what is coming, but they cannot prevent it. The question is not whether the line will crack, but when, and what Finland can negotiate in the time before it does.
February 4th brings the first sign that the Soviet offensive's opening phase has its limits. The attack on Suma breaks down after heavy losses. The probing assault has not yet achieved the breakthrough Timoshenko needs. The real effort is being saved for February 11th, after 10 days of continuous pounding designed to exhaust the defenders, strip away camouflage, and clear minefields before the main offensive begins. Finland has a few more days to hold. It is holding for now, barely, and at enormous cost. The country of 3.7 million people has now been fighting the Soviet Union for 67 days.
February 2nd in Prague, in occupied Czechoslovakia. The Nazi occupation authorities announced 2 administrative changes to the city's railway stations. Wilson Station, named for Woodrow Wilson, the American president who championed the principle of national self-determination after the First World War, whose endorsement of Czechoslovak independence in 1918 had been one of the pivotal moments in the country's founding, is renamed Main Station. Masaryk Station, named for Thomas Masaryk, the philosopher and statesman who was Czechoslovakia's first president, who built the country from nothing and governed it for 17 years, is renamed Prague Hibernia Station. The names of the men who helped make modern Czechoslovakia are being removed from the places that bore them. The Germans want to just erase signs of Czech nationhood and identity.
On February 2nd, in the Soviet Union, Vsevolod Meyerhold, one of the greatest theater directors in Russian history, a man who has spent decades revolutionizing stagecraft and whose productions had been seen across Europe, is executed by firing squad in Moscow. He had been arrested by the NKVD in June 1939 on charges of Trotskyite conspiracy. He was tortured. He wrote a letter from prison to Molotov describing the interrogation in detail. His legs beaten with a rubber strap until they were swollen. His torturers threatening to harm his wife if he didn't sign the confession. He did sign, but his wife, Zinaida Reich, was found murdered in their apartment, widely believed to have been murdered by NKVD agents shortly after his arrest. Meyerhold was tried on February 1st and shot on the 2nd. He died at 65 years old. Stalin, to whom the theater director had once written admiring letters, did not intervene.
On January 30th, Himmler orders additional deportations of Jews from the Reich to Lublin in eastern Poland, and separately authorizes the deportation of 30,000 Roma, better known as Gypsies. And on that same day, Himmler feels compelled to issue a clarification of his October 28th decree, the one encouraging SS men to father children with women of good blood outside of marriage. The worst misunderstanding of the order, Himmler writes with unusual irritation, was that it authorized SS men to approach the wives of serving soldiers. He wants to be clear that this is not what he intended. Himmler's procreation policy has apparently been generating complaints from married SS officers who are having to explain it to their wives, and from the wives of non-SS soldiers who don't want to receive visits. The machinery of racial ideology occasionally runs into a practical reality of misworded and misunderstood letters.
On February 1st, 1940, news across Britain. A veteran of the First World War, unnamed in our records, commits suicide in Britain because he is too old to participate in this one. He is not the only man for whom this is the case, and not the only one for whom the knowledge is unbearable. On the same day, in the United States, the creator of Buck Rogers, science fiction writer Philip Francis Nolan, dies in Pennsylvania at age 51. Buck Rogers was the first major American science fiction hero, the genre that imagines what technology might do to human conflict. Written by a man who doesn't live to see how much stranger reality becomes than anything he invented.
February 3rd, Whitby, a fishing town and former whaling port on the North Yorkshire coast, roughly 200 miles north of London on England's northeastern shore, best known as the location of Bram Stoker's Dracula. A Heinkel bomber is engaged by Flight Lieutenant Peter Townsend of 43 Squadron RAF, flying a Hurricane fighter. The German bomber is shot down and crashes on English soil. It is the first enemy aircraft to crash on English territory in the war. 2 of the 4 German crewmen are killed. Peter Townsend is credited with the victory. He becomes a household name in Britain after the war for an entirely different reason: his romance with Princess Margaret. But on February 3rd, 1940, he's just a pilot who shot down a bomber over Yorkshire.
Also on February 3rd, the British Air Ministry issues Specification E28/39 to the Gloucester Aircraft Company, asking for an airframe to test the W.1 gas turbine engine, designed by engineer Frank Whittle, and had been built by Power Jets Limited. Whittle has been working on the jet engine since 1930, arguing that piston engines are approaching their practical limits and that gas turbines are the future of aviation. He has been largely ignored, only occasionally funded, and consistently underpaid for a decade. This specification is the moment that the British government formally commits to building an aircraft around his work. The Gloucester E28/39 is Britain's first jet aircraft, and it flies in May 1941. The jet age begins officially with a bureaucratic specification issued in wartime Britain on February 3rd.
Now, for a few notes about life in America during this week. February 1st, in Chicago, Illinois, Frank Sinatra walks into a recording studio with Tom Dorsey and his orchestra. He records 2 songs, Too Romantic and The Sky Fell Down. Sinatra has just replaced Jack Leonard as the band's lead singer. He is 24 years old. He records these songs while Timoshenko's artillery is pounding the Mannerheim line, and Meyerhold is in a Soviet prison and a Norwegian boy is on a German submarine approaching Wilhelmshaven. The voice that will define American popular music for the next 50 years is gaining recognition. History does not coordinate its grace notes with its catastrophes.
Also on February 1st, in New York City, the National Broadcasting Company, or NBC, transmits one of the earliest network television programs, an experimental broadcast from station W2XBS in Midtown Manhattan to W2XCW in Schenectady, roughly 150 miles to the north. Approximately 400 television sets in New York can receive the signal from W2XBS, the medium that will eventually make every future war immediately visible to everyone watching from their living room begins here.
So, Daladier speaks of saving human dignity, while his soldiers stop shaving. Hitler promises his audience that they'll get all the war they want, from a country with an overstretched rail system and serious economic weaknesses. The Soviets signal they're willing to talk to the real Finnish government, while simultaneously unleashing an estimated 300,000 shells on the Mannerheim line. A 16-year-old boy eats birthday chocolate on the submarine that killed his brother. U-55's captain chooses to go down with his ship, one of the first successful examples of the aircraft-destroyer cooperation that would eventually turn the tide in the Atlantic. Meyerhold is shot in a Moscow basement. Prague loses the names of its rail stations, and Frank Sinatra records his first songs with Tommy Dorsey.
Next episode, the Second Battle of Suma reaches its climax, and the Mannerheim line begins to crack. Finland is running out of time, yet the world just keeps watching. Thanks for joining us for episode 20 of History Date Night. We'll see you next time.
See you then!